During which phase of design should a construction manager, CM, be hired? Before pre-design, after pre-design and before schematic design, after schematic design and before design development, or after construction documents and before bidding? The answer, which I'm guessing some of you probably got wrong, is actually before pre-design. It's before pre-design. Well, let's do a little thought exercise. In New York City, kind of generically, there is to build a building, it's about $20 million per floor to build a tower, a skyscraper. And let's say you're building 50 floors. So how much is your total building going to cost? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Yep, $1 billion. Pretty straightforward. 20 million times 50 is $1 billion. All right, now to put that into context, if we look at right now what's happened with mortgage rates, and no one pays for a building with cash. Now, granted, these are home mortgage rates, and it's obviously much more sophisticated, and they float bonds and they take equity, they give equity, but there's all kinds of reasons that this is an overly simplistic model. But work with me, if you would, for this thought exercise, and assume that you're going to build this skyscraper based on the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, because it goes up and down more or less with the cost of borrowing. There is a cost associated with capital. So in the a year ago in 2021, it was like 2.5%, and actually now it's 4.67, but actually now it's like 7%. So it's gone up by 4.5%. So if we say it's going up, and a typical skyscraper will take 3 years to build. So if it's gone up by 4.5%, if the cost of borrowing, if you had to borrow $1 billion, and the cost of borrowing goes up by 4.5%, how much per day is that going to cost you in interest payments? Go ahead and see if you can figure that out. And when you figure it out, go ahead and put it on the chat. Brian, I think by my calculations, I think you're off by 0. Yeah, James, I think you're right. So it's 4.5%. So $1 billion, assuming you borrowed it all up front. And of course, it's not really how it works. You pay it off as you go. I mean, they give you they don't give you $1 billion at the beginning of the project. They give you a little bit more every month. But certainly the stuff that you're borrowing at the beginning, you're having to pay for, all the way through the project till you start renting out or leasing out. And so it may take 2.5, 3 years to build a 50-story building. So at $1 billion, if you were to take that at an extra 4.5%, so times 0.0045, oops, sorry, that's wrong, times 0.045, that winds up equaling 45 million per year. And then you divide that by 365, and it's $125,000 per day. Now, as always, don't just look at a number and say, okay, it's 125,000 per day. What does that mean? That means you're paying an extra, you as the owner are paying an extra $125,000 per day than you would have been paying last year for building the same building per day. So you can imagine how that starts to really change your calculus. So maybe before you were trying to get the lowest price. That's what you were trying to get, last year, when you were paying $125,000 less per day. And not only are you paying $125,000 per day, but for every day that you take longer to complete your project, that's 1 day less that you're collecting rent. So if you take a month longer, then you're not collecting rent for 50 floors in Manhattan for an extra month. So it really starts to add up, both in terms of opportunity cost, the lost cost of not renting the floors, and in terms of the extra cost of capital, because you're not able to pay it back yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, if you're an owner, you may say, okay, before I really just wanted a cheap building, or a cost-effective building, let's call it. But now that the cost of borrowing has gone up, I just want a quick building, because if I can shave 2 or 3 months off of the 3-year construction period, then that's $125,000 a day. I don't know, 3 months is something like, I don't know, $4 million or something more in your pocket. So suddenly speed starts to become a little bit more important than some of the other factors. Now that's just looking at the last year. Rates are still, even as high as they are right now, they're still historically low. If we look at a longer time span, this is on the y-axis again is the cost of a 30-year fixed mortgage, and on the x-axis is the year. And you see back in the early 80s, oh, you don't see it because I haven't showed it to you. You see back in the early 80s so here, sorry, this is the cost of borrowing in percent on the loan. This is the year, over time. And so you see it's going up now, but it's historically still fairly low. It was very, very high in the early 80s. So when it's 18%, I mean, let's do our thought exercise again. If it's 18, so before we looked at 4.5% was the difference. So how much extra you're paying a day because interest rates have gone up. Let's just figure out what you're paying a day at 18%. So $1 billion. Go ahead and figure it out yourself. Go ahead and figure it out yourself. $1 billion at 18%. How much total are you paying a day in interest? Yeah, I mean, you're paying like $500,000 a day. So that's like $1 million every 2 days. And so that, my friends, this, my friends, is the reason the construction manager became a thing, because, and it wasn't really a thing that long ago. I mean, I guess the 80s are a while ago, but it's not like construction managers as a kind of AIA category of contract has been around forever. It's just that once interest rates reach those kind of levels, it suddenly made more sense to pay a lot more money up front, even a little or a lot more money up front, often just a little more, to get a building built a little bit quicker. And then the construction manager turned out to have all kinds of benefits, right? So the construction manager can do scheduling and phasing and feasibility and buildability, and the construction manager can do cost estimates as you go, and so forth. So what we wound up with was a category called a construction manager, and the construction manager is hired often before the architect, at least technically should be, although often they're hired around the same time. These are what I'm going to show you here. What I'm going to show you here is it's my own Amber Book version of a graphic that's in the Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice. But you have the different delivery types. Actually, just take a minute to kind of let this seep in, kind of see if you can figure it out yourself, and then we'll go over it. And so Julie said it's chart 9.3 in AHPP. So anyhow, you have these different types of buildings. So in their chart, and there's all kinds of difficulties in this chart, and maybe some challenges, but it's design bid build. Design bid build is the most common. It accounts for more. It's a project delivery type that's more common than the other types combined, but less and less as we go forward. By more than all the others combined, I think it's like 60% last I checked of projects are design big build. Negotiated select team, cost plus fixed fee, and then we have the ones that we're most interested in so far, the construction manager. And the construction manager, as you likely know if you've been studying, as you likely don't know if you haven't been, there are 3 different flavors of construction manager. It started off with this kind of idea as a construction manager as advisor. So the owner said, okay, interest rates are really high. We need to go quick. We need some more expertise on buildability and feasibility and cost estimating, and we need some help. And so the construction manager profession came about, and we started CM as advisor. The construction manager was just what it sounds like, an advisor to the owner, had a contract directly with the owner, worked with the architect. And then at some point, especially for owners that are not very sophisticated, instead of having a situation where there's so this CMS advisor, this one here, looks like this, where there's the owner, and the owner hires the architect, and the owner hires the contractor. But the owner, oops, it stopped. Hold on, I got to go back to Zoom and get it back on. There we go. All right. So so the owner hires the architect, and the owner hires the contractor. And the owner also hires a construction manager to kind of help them and advise the owner and work with the architect and work with the contractor. And especially for owners that weren't as sophisticated, the construction manager role kind of had the option of expanding to CM as agent. And in CM as agent, there's the owner, and the owner hires the construction manager, and then the construction manager hires the architect and hires the contractor. And so if you're an owner and you are either too busy because you're growing your internet, your technology company too fast to deal with this stuff, or you need a very sophisticated kind of building, and maybe you need some extra advice, you can hire you can kind of turnkey, if you know that expression, where they take care of everything, right? So you hire the construction manager. The construction manager then becomes the boss of the architect and the contractor. It looks like no big difference, but actually it's kind of a big difference. And that's called CM as agent. And then at some point, you have these construction managers who are generally people who are steeped in construction and often have long histories of constructing things themselves. Often in bigger buildings like the skyscraper we're thinking about, it would often be a Skanska or something like that, some really, really big firm that builds skyscrapers all the time. Those are the kind of people you would want to hire as a construction manager. So at some point, the construction managers kind of whispered in the owner's ear and said, we can just build this for you. And that's what the CMS constructor came about, is the idea that the owner hires an architect and it hires a construction manager, and the construction manager is going to build the building, which is weird because the construction manager is going to come in at the beginning, like we said in the answer to our problem, and then they're gonna often come up with a guaranteed maximum price after DD and before CDs, and then they're going to go ahead and often just go ahead and build the building. More on that in a little bit. All right, and then there's design build, and so design build. Design build is a situation where we have the owner, and the owner hires the architect. I know a lot of you guys know this. The owner hires the design build firm. That's it. The design build firm is sometimes architect led, it's often contractor led or builder led, and the owner is going to just hire one. And the advantage for the owner is they just have one contract, and the architect and the builders are going to work together because they're part of the same contract, part of the same team. But the disadvantage, of course, is the owner does not get the cost advantage of having competitive bidding, because that's really, well, we'll talk more about that in a minute as well, but that's really often in normal situations where the cost of capital is not so high. Above all else, the owner wants her building built at a fixed cost that's as low as possible. So anyhow, and then there's these driving factor column, right? So design, bid, build, the driving factor is cost. So if you have design, bid, build, you're designing it. This is the traditional way. This is what on the exam you're going to assume that it's design, bid, build unless you're told something else. And you have pre-design, schematic design, design development, and then you have CDs. When it's all done, you put together a bid package that goes out to the bidders, and then you pick one, often the lowest price, though not always. And then they're gonna talk to their subs. I'm sorry, it goes out to bid. The contractors and the subs work together to come up with a cost, and then you pick your contractor, and then you do construction administration. So this is the model that's most common, and in some ways, the construction manager kind of is a tweak of this, a pretty significant one, depending on which of these three flavors we're going to use, where we're bringing in a construction manager who's going to be responsible for a lot of the kind of logistics. They may be testing different systems. So the construction manager may be looking at different types of mechanical systems, or different types of lighting systems, or different types of foundation waterproofing systems, and it's going to lend the considerable experience of the construction manager. Now, many people have lamented that the architect, in our consistent drive to not be held liable for anything, kind of paved the way for the construction manager to begin with, because the construction manager was kind of brought on in a way to take some of the risk off the owner, because the architect's mantra is like, you can't sue me. And that's been the subject of many other 40 minutes of competence, and will be in the future. But above all, the architect does not want to get sued. And so in terms of, kind of the AIA contracts, it's basically what it says is the architect's kind of mantra is like, it's not my fault. I did my best. And that seems to be generally the way it goes. All right. So now looking forward, let's do another problem. Public-private partnership will be designing a stadium through construction manager as constructor. So this is, again, the one that's called CM at risk, or CM as constructor, or CMC. And the idea is that the construction manager that you bring in at the beginning here, that you're going to choose at the beginning, then is going to go forward and is going to be the person who's going to build this stadium. And it's through so it's CMS constructor project delivery. CDs are complete. As is customary, the owner brought the construction manager who will be building the project on at the earliest stages of the project. The owner thinks that the CM's construction cost estimate, what he will be charging to build the project, is $4 million too high. How can the owner be assured that she isn't getting overcharged? So go ahead and think about this. You have 30 seconds. And put it on the chat, put your answer on the chat. What does the owner do because the construction manager has all the power, right? They were brought on before there was even a project. So they can say, it's good, the stadium's going to be this much money. And the owner, what recourse does the owner have to say, wait a minute, this seems kind of high, you shouldn't do this, if the construction manager won't budge in negotiation? Yeah, they can bid it out anyway. So that's the owner's protection. So this actually happened for a stadium in James Mason University, about 2 hours from me. They hired a construction manager as constructor. The plan was always a construction manager was brought on from the beginning. They got to know the project really well, but they don't have a guarantee that they're going to be chosen to build the project. It's just, that's the understanding how it's probably going to work. But if they can't come to an agreement as to price, so the construction manager said, this is what it's going to cost. Let's say they said it was going to cost 100 million. And the owner said, I think that's about 4 million high. And then the construction manager said, we're not budging. It's 4 million. It's going to be 100 million. And the owner said, can't you come down? Because we think that's high. And sure enough, the owner rebid it. And it came in, I think, like $6 or $7 million lower when they rebid it. So the owner still has the right to decide not to hire the construction manager. Just because they're intended to be the construction manager as constructor does not mean that they automatically get to build the building. All right. So I'm going to go over something now that I used to go over all the time, but I bet it's been almost a year since I went over it. So I think it's worth going over again. It's called the amber triangle of contradiction. Okay, so in that kind of structure that we had, where we have an owner, and the owner sets up a contract, the AIA B101 typically, with the architect in design bid build. So we're back to talking about kind of vanilla design bid build, and has a separate contract with the contractor, typically the A101. And so the question is, and this will help you get a lot of questions right on the exam. So even if you don't memorize the entire contracts, just knowing this triangle and being kind of familiar with it will help you get a lot of questions right. So in design bid build, the architect and contractor have no agreement with each other. So they have no agreement with each other. So generally, all lawsuits or communication or payments and so forth often has to go through the owner. But what does the owner want more than anything? What does the owner want more than anything? I think I kind of touched on it before. Go ahead, and of course there's more than one answer, but in general, I think I'm going to go ahead and say there is kind of one answer. Go ahead and put in the chat, what does the owner want more than anything? What's their priority? They want a low fixed price. So they want to be able, the owner wants to be able to get the building built for as at the quality that was designed by the architect, but as inexpensively as possible. And they want it as a fixed price because it's not unusual for construction costs to balloon completely out of control. So they want to basically lock in the contractor to say, we're going to build it at a given price. Again, let's say it's $1 billion. They want the skyscraper for $1 billion. They don't want it to be 100. They don't want it to be 1.01 billion because that's like $10 million over budget. And that's real money. That's still coming out of their pocket, $10 million, someone's pocket. So they want a low fixed price. But the contradiction is no one really knows what a building will cost. I mean, we have some pretty sophisticated tools now. We can often get within 5%, but no one really knows what the building is going to cost. There may be asbestos in some renovation that you're not aware of, or the cost of steel may shoot up or something like that. So no one really knows what the building is going to cost, but the owner wants a low fixed price. Now, the architect, more than anything else, wants, as I mentioned, not my fault. The architect wants no fault. So architects, frankly, don't get paid like these other two people do. And so they're not willing to take on the kind of risk. And so an architect is held by what's called oh my gosh, help me guys. Put it in the, I'm blanking for a moment. Put it in the chat. What's the architect, what's the standard the architect's held to? Yeah, the standard of care. So the standard of care is what another architect would do in a similar situation, in a similar location at a similar time. So what's the architect going to do? Well, they're going to do kind of as, no worse than a typical architect would do. If you think it might be difficult to prove into court, like let's say you as an architect did something wrong and misdesigned a sprinkler system. And maybe some people died because of it, or potentially died because of it. But if you're suing the architect, it's not enough to say that the architect messed up. You have to say the architect messed up, but no other architect, that would be so atypical for an architect to, forget to place a pipe, or an architect's, consultant, plumbing consultant, to forget to place a pipe over this particular part to make a water curtain in front of the stairs. It is the responsibility of the architect to meet code, but you'd have to prove that that this is not something that's, maybe the architect made 100 million good decisions and this is the only bad one. It's a little bit more difficult. So the architect does not want to be blamed, no blame. But the contradiction is no drawing set is perfect. Now the contractor there's actually kind of two things that the contractor wants to do or has to do, or there's kind of two contradictions in the contractor. First, the contractor must build it perfectly. So whereas the architect really has, is never really at fault, not never, but often not really at fault, the contractor must build it exactly as drawn. And it has to be in perfect working order. However, as I mentioned, no drawing set is perfect. So they have to build it perfectly with an imperfect drawing set. It's kind of unfair. All right. The other thing that the contractor has to do is the contractor has to win the bid. So low bid, they have to have often the low bid, but they have to make a profit. So often, to get the lowest bid, you may have to bid to win the project. You may have to bid less than you can build the building for. So then what, right? So then you have to find a way to make money. And to make it even more confusing, no one really knows what the building is going to cost. At least not exactly. So you have to bid low. You have to bid low as a contractor to win the job, but you have to somehow make money. Now, how do you make money? Well, first of all, you have to estimate really well. And second of all, you have to often cut corners. So maybe there's something in the, maybe you can save, $150 by using inferior, I don't know, light switches that to be that wear out very quickly. So you realize that the specs don't specify the quality of the light switches. So you're going to use light switches that are the cheapest because you can save a little bit of money here or there. Or more commonly, or just as commonly, you're going to use change orders. So you're going to say, oh, well, your drawing set is not perfect. And then the owner will say, well, no drawing set is perfect. Then the architect will say, no drawing set's perfect. But the contractor will say, well, you kind of missed this and we didn't account for this. We didn't know you wanted the good light switches. So we're going to give you a change. If you want the good light switches, we're going to give you a change order. Those are going to cost an extra $700. And the owner says, what? No, like $100, $150. No, $700. And so there's going to be arguments. So the whole time the owner and the contractor are, kind of shaking hands with one arm and then punching each other in the face with the other, just, both to get it done, but also each side is pushing back on the other to make sure they don't get screwed by the other. It's really an adversarial relationship, as many of you guys know. So this is the amber triangle of contradiction. And so when we're talking about, okay, now we're going to just pause for a second. And now when we're talking about the driving factor, you see right here in design bid build, risk comes up in CM as the primary for construction manager, and for design build, risk comes up. What does our Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice and also therefore the exam mean when they say risk? Be specific. Well, risk of what? So go ahead and put in the chat, what's the risk? But list everything you can think of that they mean by risk. Liabilities, liability, risk of liability. Yeah, I mean, you'd think so. But yes, cost overrun is also a risk. Low quality is also a risk. So the problem with this particular chart, and it's really unfortunate that NCARB is so reliant on it, is that risk is a catch-all for anything that's unexpected. So a delay in schedule, they call that a risk. An overrunning cost, AHPP calls that a risk. A lawsuit from the owner, a risk. A lawsuit from a future building occupant, a risk. A lawsuit from a contractor or subcontractor, a risk. A lien filed on the project by unpaid subcontractors. If the contractor doesn't pay the subcontractors, and skips town, then it's on the owner to pay the subcontractor. So the owner's already paid for the work the subcontractors are doing. And if the contractor absconds with that money, the owner has to then pay again for those subcontractors. That's a huge risk. construction injuries, shoddy construction, insurance company won't cover a claim. And because one book defines risk so broadly, and the exams do too, so I prefer them to identify what kind of risk they're talking about, because they're actually talking about a bunch of different risks, but I am not yet king of NCARB, so I don't get to be in control. All right, so let's go through these one by one. And I think more than anything else, and yeah, and someone talked about IDP in this. Actually, it's IPD, integrated project developer. Integrated project development is another type. Why isn't integrated project development? Why isn't IPD on this list from AHPP? Go ahead and put it in the chat why you think it. Integrated project delivery. Thank you. Why is it not on this list? Yeah, you got it right. It's new. It's new. It's not even that new, right? It's a decade or more old. But AHPP has a way of kind of making new content without going back and editing the old content. So IPD would also be in here and has quite a lot of risk. So the driving factor would not be risk unless the driving factor is the architect wants more risk. But in IP, okay, so in design bid build, we talked about that. You have an architect is hired, an architect designs the building, it goes out to bid, and the lowest bid often wins. The advantage of that is the owner gets exactly what they want, a low fixed price, because the owner benefits from the competitive tension of all these different builders saying, pick me, pick me, pick me, I have the lowest price. And then the contractor is held to that price, no matter what, well, within reason. And then negotiated select team. Okay, so to be okay, to understand this chart and the questions in general in the exam, you're gonna have to be okay with positive ambiguity. Is soup a meal? If you have your meal comes with a starch, but so you can choose between mashed potatoes and French fries, but if your meal is spaghetti, then that is the starch and you don't have a meal. Are you going to have dessert and a drink, or are you not going to have dessert and a drink today? So there are different ways to read this, and if you get really hung up, if you're mentally inflexible, you get really hung up. Well, wait a minute, design bid build is a contract, but negotiate select team, is that a design delivery method? What about cost plus fixed fee? And in reality, you can have different combinations of these. So sometimes we're talking about the order of things, whether or not a construction manager is hired, how the contracts are laid out, whether or not the architect and the builder are working under the same contract. So those are kind of the broad categories, but the taxonomy is not so clear. It's not so crystal clear. So sometimes we're talking about how the price is, how you come up with a price. So let's go through these. There are others that are not listed in here, so it's even more confusing, other common ones. But design bid build is kind of traditional, and that's what we're going to assume in most cases, unless you're told otherwise. But certainly all throughout PjM and the others too, but especially PjM and PCM, there are times when they're going to ask about some of these others. A negotiated select team, the architect, the owner is going to pick the contractor kind of earlier on. And you see the contractor is picked in this idealized version, although it's not always exactly like this. But the contractor is picked after schematic design and before design development. Well, the advantage, right here, this one right here. The advantage of that, right here, the advantage of that is you can get a better contractor. So you can invite, and that's why it's typically only done with private projects, because for all kinds of anti-corruption, anti-collusion, good government reasons, in public buildings like a school or a hospital that's a public hospital, you often have to go with the lowest bid so the taxpayers aren't ripped off. But in private, if you're going to design, if you're a private developer and you want to build a multifamily housing building, and you know of a contractor or a couple of contractors who are really good, you can invite them to bid, or you can to be part of the team, and you can bring them on. And the advantage, of course, is the contractor who's going to win. You have selected them. So So there may be something about the quality of the building or workmanship. It may be the quality of their professionalism. They may be really easy to work with. It may be that they have integrity. They don't ever rip anyone off. You're not worried about them going under, even though the economy is going bad. You're not worried about them running off with the money, that kind of thing. So, so the negotiated select team, the advantage is quality, and it is a sub flavor of design bid build. So it is a type of design bid build, but instead of there being an announcement in online or in the local paper saying, look, we're seeking bids for this particular hospital. Instead of that, the owner will basically, or even the architect, will call up the contractor and be like, look, we really want you to build this. Will you come and negotiate a cost with us? And they'll negotiate it. And if they can come to an agreement on to what it might cost, there's got to be a lot of trust there. So it's often people who have worked together before, because there's a lot of room for either side to really screw the other. But you get a better building on average. Now, why is cost also a driver? Go ahead and answer that in the chat. Why would cost be a driver for negotiated select team? Yeah, I mean, my answer is it's wrong. Like, I don't know why. I can't imagine why you get a better cost. You don't get a better cost. Everything I read on it, you don't get a better cost. I think it's an error in the book. I cannot imagine that anyone would pick almost all the savings that the owner can get, and if he wants to reduce the cost of his building, is going to be in the bidding process. That's where the savings comes about. If you essentially give someone a monopoly to build your building, you're not going to get the lowest cost. I can't imagine, unless they think it's going to be cost plus fixed fee, which we're going to get to in a second. I can't imagine why it would be. So maybe you have a better, if you have worked on these projects, maybe you have a better idea than me, but I think this is actually a mistake. What do you do if there's a mistake? I don't know. Just be okay with it. And there's mistakes in publications all the time. There's, just in AHPP and Fundamentals of Building Construction and MEEB, those 3 books alone are 5,000 pages. So if the books are 99% right, that means there's what, like 50 pages that are wrong, 50 full pages worth of material that are wrong, even if the books are 99% right. So, yeah. So, all right. So cost plus fixed fee, that's our next one right here. Cost plus fixed fee, that's where it's kind of what it sounds like. This is a different discussion. So you can have design bid build with cost plus fixed fee. You can have design bid build with negotiated select team with cost plus fixed fee, or you can have some different combinations, just like you can have a meal with or without soup. And you can have a meal with or without an appetizer. So sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. But cost plus fixed fee is what you do when you don't know the scope. So you're just not sure how much something's going to cost, and you don't want to be screwed in case let's say there's potential soil contamination, and you don't want to be in a situation where there's soil contamination and then the costs go way up. So you're saying to the contractor, I'm going to pay your bills. I'm going to pay the bills of your subcontractors. And then I'm going to give you a fixed fee for your profit afterward, or as we go. So you'll get some fixed fee that we're going to agree on now, and we will pay for your costs. Now, what is the risk to the owner in cost plus fixed fee? What's the issue? What's the downside of cost plus fixed fee? From the point of view of the contractor, it solves this big problem where they're afraid they might not make a profit. Yeah, cost is unknown, so there's more of the risk of the cost overrun will go to the owner, but also the owner has to really stay on the bills, right? You can totally imagine a scenario. Let's say I'm a contractor, right? And I'm doing 2 jobs. And on one is cost plus fixed fee, and in one is kind of traditional design bid build with a stipulated sum. That's a fixed cost, what design bid build is typically done at. So in one of the 2 jobs, I'm doing 2 jobs for 2 different owners. One of them is a cost plus fixed fee, and one of them is design bid build. And this is often the case. I'm using the same sheet metal contractor to build ducts in both of them. Okay. Now, when that sheet metal contractor is billing me, do you see how it is in the sheet metal contractor's best interest, but especially in the contractor's interest, if the sheet metal contractor just kind of puts some of the hours from one of the projects on the other, just accidentally maybe, or just kind of like, oh yeah, I think that's about right, you know? And so then so basically the contractor then is paying less for the one they're not getting reimbursed for the stipulated sum. They're paying less to the subcontractor, but to the other one, the cost is being passed on to the owner who's paying the receipts. So the contractor will, in cost plus fixed fee, the contractor will pass those receipts on to the owner and say, here's what you have to pay for the sheet metal. He's charging us $60,000 this month. And you say, okay, I'll pay $60,000. Well, you really have to stay on that and say, well, wait a minute, as an owner, can you show me the hours that they worked? And then, you know, kind of, because I don't remember them coming, you know, you're telling me, but I don't remember them coming that much this month. Maybe that's for your other project. So, so you as the owner have to stay on. Now, in construction manager, we already talked about CM as advisor, and what they're saying is there's less risk, because there's less risk of a cost overrun because you have an expert on construction at the beginning. There's less risk of the sprinklers being forgotten because you have another person familiar with the code looking over the drawings. There's less risk of a delay because you have someone who's excellent at scheduling, kind of working from the beginning. And so you have hired a contractor who's not going to be your contractor, but you've hired someone with the skills of a contractor to look over everything and shepherd the whole thing through. Now, CM as agent, same thing. Now the CM as agent is where the construction manager is going to hire the architect and the contractor. And so the CM as agent, now that's some less risk that the owner has to take, because now the CM is the CM who's an expert, and the owner may not be an expert in the same way. The CM who's an expert is going to be shepherding the project through. And then time, of course, because there's someone who's kind of pushing it along. And quality, again, quality could be for any of these, right? How they pick these is a little silly, but there's, you know, it's more expensive to hire a CM unless you're paying a lot of money in interest rates. But you have less risk of something going wrong with the construction project or the process. You have a higher quality ostensibly because you have someone who's got to focus on buildability. And generally things can go quicker, especially with the CMS constructor, because there's no bidding. So with the CMS constructor, the CM then member takes off their CM hat and then becomes the contractor and builds the project. So there's none of this bid, contract, subs, costing, you know, all that stuff is taken out. So now we can move right to construction, and we can start actually often with a guaranteed maximum price after DD. So after design development, the construction manager who's going to be building the project is going to sit down with the owner and say, okay, I think it's going to cost us, you know, $100 million. And then that is our guaranteed maximum price. So unless you do something in CDs that's completely expensive, much more expensive than we think you're going to, we will give you a guaranteed maximum price, and that's called CM at risk. And the CMS constructor often uses that flavor. And then design bid build, you have the standard and you have a bridging consultant. In a bridging consultant, you have the owner, you have the design build entity, which is essentially the architect and the contractor combined. And then the owner hires a bridging consultant, and the bridging consultant is going to look at feasibility and kind of help the owner set everything up so that there are some constraints. There's, you know, kind of paint the 4 lines of the field so we know what out of bounds is, so the design builder can figure out what they need to do. So the bridging consultant will often come up with schedule and phasing and programming and that kind of thing, and kind of help the owner out with that. And then IPD, IPD is kind of a integrated project delivery. That's kind of a free-for-all in some ways, where it frees up the architect and the owner and the contractor and maybe some other people involved to put some skin in the game, to say, okay, I'm going to take on more risk for more money. So the architect may say, I'm gonna charge you less for this project, but I want some small portion of the lease income that you get from renting out to offices in the future. So the architect becomes kind of a partner, and it's less adversarial. That's the advantage, but there's a lot more fuzziness in terms of who pays for something that may be very expensive. But there's a bigger upside for the architect if things go well, and a bigger downside if the building never is profitable. All right, that is it for today. I will open it up. Oh, there's one other thing I want to talk about. It was on social media today, so if you guys saw it, then you'll know what I'm talking about. But yesterday, another company called Career Certified acquired Amberbook. What does that mean for you? Actually, nothing. It's really only good. This was always the plan. This was never. This isn't something that just kind of came out of the blue. Amberbook has been growing by almost double every year forever. It's never grown less than 65%. Last year we grew by 105%. And so as we've grown, I've been taking on more and more and more responsibilities in terms of like, meeting with HR consultants, or paying bills and rent, or dealing with cybersecurity issues and so forth. And so those of you guys who have scheduled to meet with me, and Julie's going to post, if you want to schedule, even if you're not an Amberbook subscriber, you can go online and you can schedule a time to meet with me for 20 minutes one-on-one with Zoom on that link that she just posted. And I would say probably a third of the last couple of months, a third of the time that you're supposed to meet with me, I've had to miss it for some reason or another, because I'm dealing with. I make it sound like it's not fun. Actually, I love this stuff. I love the business end of it too. But I couldn't do both, right? Especially if I'm still teaching at Virginia Tech. Especially if we continue to grow. And so I couldn't do all of the running of the business and meet with people one-on-one and make new content and do 20 minutes of content, confidence and. So it was always part of the plan to turn the operations over to someone else, which is what we've done. And for me and for you, it's only upside. So now I will be there for all of the 20, I mean, maybe not all, but almost all of the 20 minutes of help sessions that you can schedule with me. And I can spend more of my time making content and less of my time paying bills or doing payroll and that kind of thing. So all good news. Nothing shady. There's no plans to raise prices. There's nothing kind of nefarious about the whole thing. It's just it's frankly the obvious thing that happens as you start to grow, unless I want it to become kind of full-time running the company, I needed to shed that. So now I am very much the content making, meeting with you, 40 minutes of confidence, all the things that I love to do, and frankly, the things that I'm probably best at. So, all right, any questions? We'll go ahead and make it so you guys can unmute yourselves. Hold on one second. Maybe Julie, you can do that. Let's see, I can do it.
I can do it. But
perfect.
Someone has asked that you change the screen back to the triangle again.
Yeah, sure. All right, Ahmed.
Hello.
Hello.
I want to ask about cost plus fee. When you said when a contractor wants to charge for extra costs, he will charge by receipt. But you've mentioned about also hours in another project, like how much your labor costs. Is that in cost plus fee, or is that in fixed fee or lump sum?
Okay, this is a totally understandable confusion. Are you confusing how much the owner pays for the contractor, the builder, with how much the owner pays for the architect? So some of these same terms are used for both. So say that again. Now ask your question again. So we're talking about how much the owner is paying for the building to be built, and we're talking about cost plus fixed fee. Now, there are two types of cost plus fixed fee. There's cost plus fixed fee, and there's cost plus fixed fee with guaranteed maximum price. So you can see to cost plus fixed fee and then put a cap on it, and just so the owner feels comfortable that it's not going to completely run out of control based on the receipts that come in. So go ahead and ask your question again, because I think I misunderstood it.
So I spoke about charging per hour. Is that is the same like receipts, or is it different?
Yeah. So what'll happen is what'll happen is the owner, of course, hires an architect, and the owner hires a contractor, and the contractor hires subcontractors, right? So it's quite often in big projects, especially, that the contractor isn't really someone who's swinging a hammer. The contractor is someone who's scheduling things and coming up with bills and basically doing the administration of a construction project, because it's, as you might imagine, pretty complicated. And so, or at least complex, or at least it get complicated, maybe not complex, but certainly complicated keeping track of it all. And so in cost plus fixed fee, this subcontractor is going to send a bill, an invoice to the contractor, and this one's going to send an invoice, and this one's going to send an invoice, and it may be hourly or it may be a fixed price. Typically, it's a fixed price based on the drawings, but if it's it depends if the drawings are done when you start, right? So if the subcontractors bid on a DD set or an SD set, then obviously it's not fully baked, it's not fully cooked. The project is not fully cooked. So then it would be more likely to be hourly. Because when they bid on it, they couldn't give a fixed amount because the project hadn't been worked out yet. So anyhow, it could be hourly, or it could be by the job, or it could be by the cubic yard of concrete, or it could be by the cubic yard of soil moved, or it could be by the number of doors installed, or depends on the subcontractor. Each one could be different. But anyhow, the contractor is then going to pass those bills on to the owner, and the owner is going to pay all the subcontractors, and then give the contractor some amount as a agreed upon profit to cover both their costs, because the contractor has to, pay for certain things, and then and also because their own people, then the contractor has to make a profit. That's the whole point of an enterprise, or part of it anyway.
So whether it's hourly or based on receipts, it's going to fall, all of them, under
the receipts are still
cost plus fee.
Yeah, it's going to be both receipts and hourly, right? So even hourly, there's going to be materials. So when I say receipts, I mean the subcontractor's receipts are invoiced to the contractor. So the subcontractor is going to have an invoice. So it's a plaster subcontractor. Their invoice is going to include the cost of the actual plaster and their hourly fee, and maybe it's overtime, or maybe it's going to be by the room or by the square foot. It depends on what it's a case by case situation. Depending on whether a whole bunch of factors, not least of which whether or not we're hurrying this along, or whether we want to give everyone enough time to look at all the finished drawings and then come up with a cost. But in any event, the receipt is going to be materials and labor, and the labor may be hourly, or it may be labor per square foot of wall plastered. It could be anything. It's a case by case situation. Like I said, you have got to be mentally flexible. Like I'll give you another example that I forgot to mention. CM as advisor and CM as agent, they use the same AIA document, same contract. Two different flavors of delivery, same contract. So yeah, it's not quite so clear cut, because construction's a mess. Like it just depends. And even if we could kind of tease all this out, maybe we tease it all out for where you live, but where I live, maybe it's done completely differently. The tradition is different. So it could be where you live, the plaster is charged per square foot of wall and ceiling that they plaster, and it could be where I live, they charge per hour. And so even if you wanted to kind of set everything in stone, it would still wind up varying by region.
But what happened if subcontractors exceeded the guaranteed maximum?
So if there's then it's on the contractor. So with the guaranteed maximum price, if you exceed the guaranteed maximum price, that risk shifts to the contractor. They may lose money on the project.
Oh, okay. So just one more question. What's the difference between construction manager as agent and as constructor?
Yeah. So construction manager as agent has an owner hiring an architect and a contractor, and also hiring a construction manager who's going to be an advisor during the project. So the construction manager is going to advise. This is the OG flavor of construction manager. But construction managers over time said, I can just build that for you. I'm pretty familiar with the project. So then the owner in that case is a contract as a CM as constructor, CMC. The owner hires an architect and the owner hires a construction manager. The construction manager is both going to advise from the beginning, and if the price comes out to the owner's liking, the plan is for the construction manager to build the project as well. And so it's this weird thing where there's like a whole bunch of different flavors, right, of that this can happen, but there's not an infinite number. Like it's still within the AIA documents, within the construction industry, there are a bunch of flavors, and how they came about is it's like, okay, so it's like evolution, right? So if we were, if you were to make humans right now, like right now, you would never make humans with a single spine. You would make humans with two spines, one coming up from each leg. That's a more sturdy way to do it. The reason so many of us have back problems is because our backs as a single spine were designed for things like, other animals that walk on all fours. And so because they walk on all fours, a single spine makes more sense. Once we started walking upright, a double spine makes more sense, but it's vestigial, it's still left over. Humans didn't evolve from what's perfect for us now. They evolved for what happened when we were walking on all fours, and suddenly we started, not suddenly, but gradually we started walking on two. And because of that, we have a less than optimal spine situation, backbone. Well, it's the same thing with this. A lot of this stuff came about, and then just because it was a tweak of something that came about before it, right? So there'll be, something will happen, and there'll be, like I said, there'll be, a bunch of people will say, we really want to work together collaboratively, and then they'll come up with IDP. Or they'll say, we want, but then the IDP within IDP, there's like 3 different flavors. And so so there's not an infinite number. It's almost like, I don't know, like it's like driving a car. You can drive anywhere you want, but you have to kind of stay on the road unless you have a Jeep. So it seems like there's a bunch of different possibilities, and there are, just like you can drive anywhere, but you really can't drive anywhere. You can't drive on your neighbor's lawn. So so that's how you have to think of this, that there's a bunch of different combinations. And a lot of them don't, a lot of them have names, but the name is maybe not the type. So some of them are meals that are just spaghetti and meat sauce and nothing else. And some of them are, heirloom carrots with, as an appetizer, and then, and a glass of red wine, all kinds of different concoctions. So some of them have drinks and appetizers, and some of them don't. And so you just have to be okay with being okay. Not that you're not, I'm not suggesting that. All right, Natalia.
Hey, I have a question. So could you please come back to the table of contents that you did with all delivery methods? Thank you.
Sure.
I don't understand why there is a bid at the end on the negotiate selected team and the custom plus fixed fee.
Yeah, so let me see if I can clear this. No, it's not letting me. All right, so it's actually a good question. In the negotiate select team, why is there bidding here? Because that's where the negotiation happens. So it's not really bidding. It's negotiation. And kind of bidding. It can go, the owner can send it. If the owner and the contractor can't come to an agreement, the owner can say, thank you for your time, and send them on their way. But it's a bidding based on what it's not really bidding, it's negotiation between the owner and one contractor.
And the cost plus fixed fee, you still have the bidding, right? Or no?
So cost plus fixed fee actually could be anything. Okay. Right. So you could do IDP with cost plus fixed fee. You can do design build with cost plus fixed fee. That's the confusion, right? You can do design build with cost, but it's just a way of paying for it. So it could be cost plus fixed fee in some of the CM ones as well.
Oh,
I see you can do it. It's like having soup. You can have soup with just about any meal.
okay.
So, right? Weird.
And just one quick one, because I know that is a lot of people want to ask you. In the question that I believe it was the second question, that how the owner can be sure that he is not being overcharged by the construction manager. Could the owner compare with the cost estimate that the architect did?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And that's done all the time. Yeah, that's done all the time.
Instead of
So,
hiring a third party.
yeah, they can compare. They can compare that, but and they can do, and sophisticated owners can do their own cost estimating. They're probably doing it as they go as well. So it's so generally most of the more complicated versions of this, we're talking about often really big projects where really sophisticated owner. I mean, there are some a lot of owners are not sophisticated, but there are some owners that are super sophisticated, and this is because this is what they do. They have a construction division or a facilities management division within their organization. And this is, they have people who used to be contractors that they've hired. And these are people who, that's their job. It's just to protect the owner. And that's something they're doing all the time. So it really, there's a yawning range of sophistication between some owners and other owners.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Owners rep teams. Yeah. I'm sorry, Fred.
Hey, Michael, it's Frederick.
Hey.
Hey, how are you? So, yeah, Natalie actually answered the question I had about does the architect communicates with the contractor, or the owner. It's not clear in the agreements of between the architect and the owner if the architects include in this package the rough estimates. It's not in the agreement anywhere, so I'd like to clarify that.
For which flavor of project delivery?
Well,
it depends. Well, and some of the ones with a lot of the ones with the CM, maybe all the ones with the CM prepares the cost estimates, not the architect. So and in design build, it's the architect and the contractor are the same. So there's not really the same kind of estimating. Still maybe the same estimating, but certainly not the same kind of bidding going on. So it really varies. But go ahead.
There's no rough estimate done by the architect. Rough estimate done during design development schematic under.
No, there is. Oh, which CM? One? Under CM. It's done with the CM and the architect together, or maybe just a CM. I can't remember. I forgot who's responsible for it, but I think it's just a CM.
CM is responsible that differently, but not where it's not clear to me is that because reading in the agreement, but maybe I'm just referring to just the B101. Typical.
Yes, the CM, as you probably know, the CMs have their own agreements that are separate. That are not the B101 or not the A101 rather.
Oh, right.
Or not, and also not the B101. So you'd have to look up the agreement for an architect and an owner building in CM as agent or building in CM as constructor.
Oh, okay, got you. So the owner can compare so if the architect does a rough estimate under CM anyway, then if it's there, then the owner can still compare both of them. And
yes,
it's a tricky situation though.
Yeah, but I think the architect usually doesn't. I mean, that's not part of it would not typically be part of their scope. That's why you brought the CM in to begin with. So the architect can keep plugging along. But you can imagine a world where the architect says we're going to do a real. I mean, there's cost estimating and there's cost estimating, right? So there's per square foot unit cost or whatever, and that's that the architect can often, especially an experienced one, can do be able to tell the owner this seems a little high. We've done our last 3 motels. We've done at this much per square foot, and these guys are charging you more. You might want to double check on that. But that's easy, right? That's like a 2-minute calculation. But kind of the detailed the detailed estimates that are done in projects where you're figuring out every door latch and every light fixture. That's a different animal altogether.
Well, that's CM, yeah. If it's a little blurry to me, Laura, if the owner or the architect bring the contractor and there's no design bid build. There's no like they're not shopping around for different contractors, but the architect brings a contractor for all the project. Every time he starts a project, he goes, well, I work with, and you know, this contractor, and and then he starts another client and he says, well, I work with this contractor. And so he gives the drawings and the contractor prices the project, and then the owner hires the contractor. What is it? It's a negotiated select team then?
So did the architect, did it go out to bid to multiple people, or it just went out to bid to one?
No, just
one person.
Just referring one contractor, and then
then it would likely be a negotiated select team.
So it falls under a negotiated select team. Okay.
Yeah, but it could also be, you could have a negotiate. That's the thing, right? You could have a negotiated select team design build. So you could choose who the design builder is. I guess never mind. That's not true. Design builder is always essentially a negotiated select team. You could have a CM as advisor and still have a negotiated select team. So I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. So this is the thing, right? Just like you can have a car that's both big and brown. You can have, you know, so some of these different qualities are orthogonal. And actually, I got to give you guys credit. Based on these questions, you guys are totally getting it. Totally getting it. So I got to give at least the people who are asking questions credit, because typically when I go through this, they'll say like, well, does the design bid build have a cost plus fixed fee? Or, you know, like they kind of want to have the definitive stuff, and it's not really like that. I mean, like I said, there's a million different combinations, but not a billion different combinations of these different meals that you can have and different things you can pull off the menu. And so you have the right idea. And I'm not even sure, you know, every combination has been explored. It's quite possible that, you know, you could write in a cost plus fixed fee for a bridging, I don't know. I don't really know, IPD or something like that. You could, it's the private law of contracts, right? So contracts are two people who agree on things. And so there's, even when there's not the flexibility, you can still drive on your neighbor's lawn if your neighbor's okay with it. So yeah.
So reading on CMC agreements, the price is established after design development. However, during design development, not every details are drawn. So what happened if the CMC discover that there are more costs added because the construction drawings are adding more details?
Yeah. So that's where the insurance companies and lawyers get involved. So the CM as constructor doesn't come up with the cost. They come up with a guaranteed maximum price. So they say, okay, based on DD, we promise it will not cost more than $100 million. Right. And then if then the owner and the architect stick a bunch of, you know, gold-plated toilets in the project during CDs, there's stuff in the contract that says no, this is not normal. We weren't planning for that. And the guaranteed maximum price is not the price. It's not a fixed price. It's a price that won't go beyond, so that they can continue with the same CM. But then at the end, they can say, okay, this is our final cost, because by then they have everything they need. And if the owner says no, that's too expensive, and the CM as constructor says that's the price, dude, you got to pay it or not, the owner can say, I choose not to pay it. I'm going to put it out to bid.
Well, if it's too expensive, then the owner has the choice. I mean,
has the choice.
Some design reconciliations, or he has to slash the project. He has to face, or he has to reduce, or he has to do something to reduce the cost.
Right. Exactly. All right. W. Bradfield.
Okay,
I have time for one last question. W. Bradfield.
Yeah. Hi, Michael. Just two quick questions. I just want to be clear about this. I'm looking at the chart, and what you said earlier is that cost plus fixed fee is really, seems like it's not a delivery type. Right?
It's not, exactly.
So,
exactly.
But it's under delivery type.
I know. Stay flexible, man. Sometimes people will have onions for dinner. That's their only meal. So they call it delivery type, but they're not, everything under there is not a delivery type. Specifically, negotiated select team and cost plus fixed fee is not technically a delivery type. So it's so there's like 3 different things or 4 different things. There's the overall delivery type, that's design, bid, build, CMS advisor, CMS agent, CMS constructor, design build with bridging, and IPD are kind of the main flavors, right? But then there are different ways to pay. So you could do a cost plus fixed fee without a guaranteed maximum price. You could do a cost plus fixed fee with a guaranteed maximum price. You can do a stipulated sum where you have basically your, a fixed price, and you could do hourly. You could do percentage of construction project cost. You can do anything really. I mean, you can, in theory, as long as both sides agree, you can, and it's legal, you can do anything. So so they're orthogonal. You can decide how you're going to pay someone. And to make it more confusing, that cost plus fixed fee might show up also in the owner's contract with the architect. So that's a way the owner can pay the architect as well, where the architect gets a guaranteed, the owner's going to pay the architect's cost for their labor, and then going to pay them a fixed amount for profit. So it can happen both with the owner and the contractor, or the owner and the architect. All right, everybody.
Oh, just one real quick question, Michael.
Sure, what's up?
So, there's a lot of questions, who is the agent for the owner? So can we assume that CM advisor, CM contractor, constructor, the architect's still the owner's agent? Like CM?
No, the architect is not. If you see a question about that, the architect is not the owner's agent.
So the CM's the owner's agent on all of these?
No.
Advisor, agent?
No, only agent. So to be an agent has a very specific legal meaning. And that meaning is that the agent can act on behalf of in this case, the owner.
Right.
So the agent, without having, right. In that case, the agent can act on behalf of the owner without having to consult the owner. But the the architect is not is presumably working for the best interest of the owner, but is not the agent of the owner. The architect can't have the final call, or just make a call about, yeah, it's okay, we're gonna postpone this it's okay, we're gonna postpone this project by a month. The architect can't make that call legally for the owner. Important decisions like that have to be made by the owner, often in consult with the architect, but have to be made by the owner.
But CM as agent.
Yes, in that case they can. But more often the owner has agents. The owner will designate agents, specific people who can speak for the owner, right? So you're the owner. Well, what's the owner of that skyscraper? Well, maybe Goldman Sachs owns 10% of it, right? And maybe, there's some LLC or some legal entity that owns that skyscraper. And so that legal entity has a bunch of people involved in it. And so like, who can speak on behalf of that legal entity? So in the contract, in a lot of the contracts that the AI produced, there is a space for saying who is the agent of the owner, like what human being can speak for the owner, because you don't want a situation going into a building project where somebody who owns, somebody who's lent money to the project is acting as an agent of the owner and saying, yes, I think we should go with the blue tile. You don't want that situation. So you identify who can speak for the owner, because often the owner is an entity that's a fiction, essentially a fiction. I mean, the idea that there's a company, the idea so Coca-Cola can build a bottling plant, but if you went to someone 500 years ago and you said, Coca-Cola built a bottling plant, they'd be like, how the hell can Coca-Cola build a bottling plant? Only a human can build a bottling plant. How can a concept like Coca-Cola own a bottling plant? Only people own things, entities, these kind of fictional entities. But we have all collectively bought into the idea, because it's helpful to us, that there is something called like an owner. But really, from kind of a human evolutionary point of view, that concept that a bunch of people, can get together and create a company, and that company then owns something, is really a pretty crazy idea. I know that's not where you're going. I know that's not where you were going.
Citizens United, right? There's an example
right.
of somebody who's not a person who has equal rights as a person, and the whole point of a corporation is to, not be liable. Yeah. But so can we assume CM as agent, then the CM is the agent for the owner, and
yes.
the other two is not
the CM. The CM can act as the agent for the owner. in that case.
Yeah.
But
For that-
that doesn't mean
only
the owner
one.
can't, that doesn't mean the owner, no, not necessarily. Anyone could, the owner could have other agents. So an agent is someone who can act on behalf of the owner. So again, the owner may be Coca-Cola, but the owner may pick John Smith to be their agent. And then that agent may pick Jane Doe to be the CM agent. So an agent is someone who can speak on behalf of the owner, and I don't think there's any reason that has to be limited to one, especially for really big projects. But they're just people who basically can make the call. You have to have people who can make the call. But yes, CM as agent means that entity, this construction management company, can speak for the owner, especially when it comes to managing the architect and the contractor.
Okay.
All right,
But
guys.
The other two, no. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, guys. Good night. Get licensed.
Working on it.